Hey, what's up? Zach here, and today I've got the all-new EQLZ 360. Let's get into them. And thanks to EQLZ for sending me a pair of these to check out. However, as always, this video is not sponsored, and all opinions, good, bad, and indifferent, are all my own. Now, starting off in the uppers, I know we've all become so jaded when looking at anything that appears to be leather. However, this is a true leather upper, at least in terms of the lace eyelets and the support structure around the upper of the shoe. Now that encases a really chunky textile mesh, which honestly, like, you have to feel to believe just how substantial it is. And it kind of has to be, because that's really the entire shoe, right? The entire shoe is a booty liner, and then it is reinforced by these really thick leather leaflets that come up over. Now the lace line, like I said, does go through all these leaflets, so of course there's not going to be a runner's knot in these. However, this is a mid-top booty liner construction shoe. You do only get one little layer of padding around the heel counter, right? And that does keep you in the shoe. I mean, heel slippage on these was mild. Obviously, you're not going to slip out of the shoe, but there is a little bit of movement in there. That does get better and better as you kind of break the shoe in. Higher volume feet are gonna not have as much slippage as a lower volume foot, just because, the lower volume foot, it being a slipper tongue or booty liner shoe, and then you have, just these leather pieces that come up over, you're gonna have to tie it down. Now, what I noticed about this combination of leather that, actually it does start in the midsole, right? It comes all the way up over the shoe. It is like a true arch that goes all the way around the shoe, connected by the laces. What I noticed is these shoes definitely feel like they have a ton of freedom of movement, but the containment, at least like on my URS system, to me felt like a 5 out of 5 shoe. It was definitely stout enough. And so that piece of the puzzle, they got 100% like on the money, which I thought was really exciting. Now, if you look at this thing on the breathability test, it did heat up 109.3 degrees, which, I mean, it isn't terrible. I thought it was going to do a little bit better, just because this, textile weave in here does look so airy. And it really is, because if you look at the breathability mapping, the fog really just does pour out of the central part of the shoe, where the tongue should be, right? Like it kind of right smack dab in the middle of the shoe. However, at the distal forefoot, it does take a few seconds where fog can start to get out of there, and you look underneath of it, and you can see why. It does have that under layer there. So it's not bad whatsoever. It's not sub 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is kind of the most elite shoes out there, but by all means, it's not bad for sure. Now look at this thing on the upper durability test, though, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. I thought this was kind of the real remarkable thing. Number one, yeah, I mean, the leather starts to get scuffed up, but not terribly, and the woven upper, I mean, the burr does not get through this. I mean, this is, this is pretty darn good, especially for it being a woven upper shoe. Now, in terms of outdoor play, yeah, you can probably start to catch this leather on really gritty outdoor courts for sure. It's going to start to look a little bit weird. But in terms of protection and in terms of just raw durability, we'll get to the outsole too, it really is not bad, especially on indoor courts as well. And just the last little thing I'll say about the uppers is, once again, like the 247, I thought I was going to get a ton of lace irritation from it being a pretty thin slipper tongue or booty liner shoe. Not one bit of lace irritation whatsoever. Now the laces are pretty chunky, so they're a little more comfortable, but also there is padding in the most proximal aspect of the ankle collar. So, I mean, you are getting protection from when you tie them down, but just the way they lay on your foot, really, for me, no lace irritation whatsoever. But getting into the midsole teardown, this is one of these shoes I had to cut both directions of the midsole to see what exactly was going on, because you can feel a lot of substance on the medial arch and on the lateral side, but we'll get into that in a second. But I think what the real interesting thing is yeah, it is a Pebex midsole, but it's broken up in the rear foot and then in the forefoot by this ridiculously dense foam in the middle, almost to the point where it's as strong as a shank would be. Now, obviously, it's going to start to wear down a little bit, but this is, I mean, I thought this was plastic under here. That's how dense this is. Now, if you cut through it, there is a little bit of plastic on the medial arch, and I do think on the lateral arch, especially where the leather kind of comes in there might be a little bit of TPU there, kind of like the 247 did, where it had those kind of walls. I think these are kind of the same. And because this leather, rubber, and foam combination here is so built up, it does kind of act like the 247 or the Asics Gel Resolution 9. Those type of shoes where it almost has like the external chassis. That's really what's containing all the foam. But I just could not get over how dense this foam is in the middle of the shoe. It just feels like an EVA, but it is just ridiculous. And on foot, these feel like they have more arch support than any other shoe I have tested. You can actually feel it. That's because if you look at it from the top, the strobel board looks so narrow. And that's because it is. You're actually sitting on this medial shelf here in the shoe as well as on the lateral side, but that's where all the bulky support is. That's where all the structure is, but also all that super dense foam is right under there as well that kind of molds to your arch. And that's what it felt like after a few uses, like it was molding my foot, really similar to my Zen slide here with the dorsal retention strap, where after a few uses, it really feels like it is actually molding to the dorsal arch. So it really is incredible how much arch support these things have. Yeah, they'll accept an orthotic, not a super flat one, but one that has a little bit of an arch itself, right? Like can contour to it, but just on their own, probably shoe of the year right now in terms of pure arch support. But if you look at the bounce height test, a lot like the 247, yeah, it is a Pebex midsole, but only got 34 centimeters in the rear foot, 35 in the forefoot, which I mean isn't terrible, right? It's middle of the road, but a lot of times in Pebex shoes, we see this ball bouncing to the moon, right? That ball bearing is just going crazy. And in EQLZ shoes, that Pebex is more meant for kind of more fluid motion. It's meant for more shiftiness on the ground. It's not necessarily formulated as a rocket ship like, you know, some of them are, especially in more like the super shoe running category. So also this midsole has a lot more structure to it than some other Pebex midsoles we see. It's much more on the line of like Way of Wade midsoles versus like Nike's Zoom X. So it just shows you, right? I mean, we did the same thing. We talked about the Zen slide, whereas, you know, we went through how many different variations of TPE there were. Just because a shoe says Pebex doesn't mean it is automatically just made for one thing. You can dial it in to really do whatever you want, which I really like in these is they dialed that Pebex in to make this more of kind of like a shifty, you know, footwork focused shoe. And that's what it feels like, and that's what it does. All right, but getting into what I was most excited to check out was the Outsole tread, mainly because of their Instagram page and how they kind of, that, you know, 3D rendering they have of it, and it's just a really cool advertisement they have for it. So I was really excited to see if it actually worked. You look at it on the grip test ramp, these things slip at 41 degrees, pretty good for initial grip. Now, you look at the actual, you know, topography of the Outsole tread. Now, I haven't heard of the term reaction diffusion, I think, since my second year at Kent State. So it's been a while, but they modeled this after a reaction diffusion pattern, which, in English means it's a chemical reaction that spreads out over a surface. That's how a zebra gets its stripes, basically. And what happens is there's little variations in the chemical reaction between the two chemicals, and as it spreads out over the surface, you get variations of the pattern. That's why, all the zebra stripes, there is little differences in them, right? Or a frog's spots, right? There's little differences in the spots. Now, they kind of took that same concept and did it on the Outsole tread. So they describe the Outsole tread is curved typology in the forefoot, cellular here in the midfoot, then mitosis in the rear foot, which I thought was pretty interesting. That's how they describe it, but it's basically dots and lines. And then you also have this cellular pattern right here in the middle of the rear foot. I think it's cool. I mean, there's definitely a thought process to it. And we kind of see that in a lot of treads nowadays where does it really matter what the tread is as long as it's multi-directional or multi-shaped, right? As long as you're getting traction in different directions, that's good. Now, they said they took this from millions of data points, right, and how people actually pivot their foot on a basketball court. They put a little more of a dense structure here under your big toe. Kind of, you can see like where your big toe is supposed to be, and it just comes through the shoe, right? That's, it just more mimics the human foot, which kind of like the 247 with that traction, once again, pretty darn good. So what I noticed on these is number one, initial traction is one of the best out there. They do pick up dust that's easy enough to wipe off. Like I didn't really have to do anything, just literally one wipe, and it was really no problem. I never slipped out in them. And they almost, to me, feel like a combination of the New Balance Fresh Foam BBV2 and the KD14 in terms of those two types of traction. Just really confident. You feel low to the ground on them, even though, it's just a normal stack of foam. But I think it's also just how the shoe moves, right? So the shoe's so malleable, right, in the uppers and in the midsole, that it really is interesting, like how when you bend the shoe in different spots, how different parts of this tread kind of move and grab with these like different types of tread patterns. So honestly, put it this way, a lot of companies put Outsole treads out there just kind of willy-nilly, right? Like here's just the shape. Like there was definitely some thought taken in this, which I thought was pretty cool. The other really interesting thing is the durometer of this outside kind of casing of rubber is ridiculously high, right? I mean, it's above 22, and then the internal rubber comes in at a 16. This, on the outsole durability test, I should say 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, both the outer and the inner, basically the burr just scuffs it. So this outsole tread has no problem on outdoor courts. I actually had mine on the concrete here so that I could shoot baskets from the concrete as well as the hardwood equivalent. And these things were grabbing the concrete. This is a little more slick concrete. No problem at all. And it actually felt really good too. You felt insulated from the ground. These actually felt, like I said, they feel low to the ground because of the foam makeup and how they dialed in the Pebex, but it also feels, like you're not pummeling through the concrete. So really on any court surface, these things are gonna grab really well as resist wear pretty well. One thing is, you look at the speed ratio, they only come in at a 2.14, no actual shank in them, so no shank score bumps that up. And yeah, they are a little bit bottom heavy feeling shoes, and there's just a lot of material on them. To me, they're more quick, right? And they're just so malleable and they're so easy to kind of get in and out of weird situations. Especially on this court that I have set up in here, you can kind of tell their capabilities more on this court versus the big open court that I play on. Whereas in this one, I do not want to run into the wall, right? So I kind of have to make these quick steps here. And for me, that's kind of, difficult as it is. But then having actual blockers here, actual things I do not want to run into, really shows you how quick these things are in really kind of reactionary situations, right? So I think that's kind of the word there, is reactionary. They've got really quick reaction type speed. In terms of getting up and down the court, they're just middle of the road. They're pretty good. But in terms of that quick, pivot stepping and just quick reaction steps, I think that's where these really kind of show their speed. All right, but getting into the fit of the 360s, this is kind of like a tale of two shoes. It's really interesting. Number one, it does have a 14-degree inflare, which is, it's getting up there. Number two, it comes in at 29 centimeters in length, 9.4 centimeters metatarsal width, 10.4 centimeters of toe box width, but then a toe box taper of only 22 degrees. It's super mellow in there. Yeah, it's inflared a little bit because, it gets off, it's a way to make the shoe a little bit quicker. And then the inflare isn't too bad in the forefoot. So, I could feel there was a ton of room in there. The one thing is, even though they are 9.4 centimeters metatarsal width for an 11, US men's size 11, I still did have cramping in my left foot for a little bit because I just hit right where the bulkiest part of that leather rubber foam combo was on the outside. And if you have a really prominent styloid process too, a really C-shaped foot, you're probably gonna have some cramping there too. Now, the good part is it's all materials that will break in. So like I said, it broke in, it broke in fine. But you are going to have, you're going to have cramping if you've got little lumps and bumps right in this middle part of the outside of the shoe. It's just the way it's going to go. Now, I'd say if you're a narrow, medium foot, I would go true to size. If you're narrow, honestly, I probably would go down a half size actually, just so that you're not cranking the laces the kingdom come. So I'd say narrow, go half size down, especially because they're 29 centimeters, for my men's size 11, so you get a little bit of length reduction too. A medium, I'd say if you're short-footed, you can go down a half size, weight reduction, as well as a little more of a glove-like fit. A 2E, I'd probably go true to size. A 4E, I'd probably go up 1/2 on these. I wouldn't go up more than that because they're going to start to get a little bit heavy. And then the heel slippage is going to start to get a little bit more. You're going to have to start putting, you're going to start augmenting the heel counter. If you do that, you're going to start actually customizing the shoe. In terms of the snake bit and foot, like I said, for arch pain, they're probably the best out there right now. These ones, the Fresh Foam BBV2, hopefully the BBV3 is as good. Oh my God, I hope it's as good. But in terms of arch contour and moldability of that arch, it is absolutely fantastic. In terms of ankle sprainers too, it was hard to roll these things. So for that too, it's pretty good. Like I said, for orthotics, they're okay for certain orthotics. They better have an arch on them as well that can mold, like carbon fiber orthotics and things like that, or more flat. I don't know if they're really gonna do well, but you really have to match the material of the orthotic to the shoe. I would say. So honestly, for most things, they're pretty good just on their own. In terms of the almighty performance or playability of the 360s, I think I alluded to it. In terms of shifty footwork, low to the ground feeling shoes that don't have the cons of some of the low to the ground feeling shoes, these ones, like I said, same with the 247, right? They're just very well thought out shoes. Yeah, they're a little bit bottom heavy, but does that really matter for what they are? Right? If you want these to be the leaning gamma, they're just not going to be them. They're much more, like I said, a stable, more shifty footwork, more footwork focused shoe, right? And like I said in the speed section, that reaction time on these, that's where I kind of saw these really shine. So for what they are, yeah, I mean, they're one of the best out there. I would expect really nothing less, given who designed these or who helped design these. And then, you know, like I said, to me, they really reminded me of the KD14 and a lot of the feel of the shoe, right? Just how shifty they were, kind of how buttery they felt. And I do really wish that the KD line would get back to that kind of morphology of shoe, because this one kind of seems like what would the next logical step of the KD line would be. It'd be something like this. So yeah, for I think what these were designed for, I think it's, you know, 10 out of 10 for what they were designed for. Is everyone going to love them? No, of course not. But like I said, to me, as someone who like really enjoys kind of getting into the gritty of a shoe's design, yeah, in terms of what they're made for, I'm not really sure there's a lot better out there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, especially if you picked up a pair. I'd love to know what your thoughts have been. And if you're someone that's also been a KD enthusiast, especially a KD14 enthusiast, do you kind of see the same, you know, do you kind of see the same ghosts of the KD14 in this like I do? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to see what I'm talking about with the 247 shoe I tested out this summer, I'll leave that video linked up above, and make sure you subscribe down below. Respect, rubber, and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.